Hi everyone, I'm Sheila. Welcome back to The Truth About Death and Dying. As always, I put out a little disclaimer that I'm not an expert in anything, but I do have experience with the death and dying process because I took care of my dad while he was dying of liver cancer. On today's show, I wanted to talk about the change of personality that often comes with a terminal diagnosis. And I can really only speak to my own experience with my dad. But I think it's important because it was the one thing that I was totally unprepared for. Like, when you kind of come into this process, you're aware of things that you're going to be up against. But the one thing that no one warned me about, or I don't know if anyone thought to warn me about, was the personality change that would occur. And I blame it 100% on the cancer. But my father was a jovial, happy-go-lucky guy. He just was always in a good mood. Like, it was rare if my dad was down in the dumps or in a bad mood. It was really, you'd be hard-pressed to ever find him in that frame of mind. In fact, when my dad retired from the Air National Guard, which he worked for like 30 years or whatever, he, at his retirement party, one of his coworkers gave him a shot glass. And my dad was not a drinker, and never, like I explained in earlier podcast episodes, that he really didn't drink. I mean, maybe have an occasional sangria once a year at Christmas or something, but he was not a drinker. But at his retirement party, one of his colleagues gave him a shot glass and said, "This is for whatever you put in your coffee every day, because nobody is this happy every day." Like, my dad was just an incredible human, kind to everybody. Just like, you'd be hard pressed to find my dad say a bad thing about anyone, even someone that would deserve it. And he would always find the good. He always found the good. And just very positive, uplifting kind of human. So I was very lucky to have him. And so when we got into this scenario of him in this terminal illness, at first he really, like, for the first, he was terminally diagnosed in March of 2020. And for the first 6, 7, like maybe the first year after that diagnosis, no change. You wouldn't know anything was wrong with my dad. And then as the cancer progressed and started really chewing away at him, his personality started to change. And it was so hard to deal with. My father also was very OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder. For those of you who don't know OCD, so things had to be a certain way. If you ever watched the show Monk, OCD. So, and my dad, he embraced that. In fact, one time we were watching a show where somebody was, I don't remember what we were watching, but had OCD. And my dad was like, "What is that called?" I said, "That's OCD, Dad. That's what you have." And he's like, "Oh yeah," like, he owned it. But when someone is going through that dying process and, they've got cancer eating at them and destroying all the good inside of them, it takes a toll. So it exacerbates that OCD incredibly. And then the anger comes in, and the lack of patience comes in. And as I said in previous podcasts, my dad was very independent until probably 4 or 5 months before he died. So, and he had about, oh my God, I can't remember now, it was 9, 12, some medications he took every day. And my dad was very meticulous about noting these medications. So each of my siblings and I, my 2 brothers and I, we were schooled on how to do these medications, how to document them. It was a process. So, and so I would be sitting there with my dad, and he would be to this side of me, and he'd be berating me because I wasn't getting it, or I wasn't doing it right, or whatever the problem may be. Meanwhile, I'm crying, not so he can see me, and not that I was afraid that for my dad to see me cry, but I didn't want him to see me cry because he was making me cry because he was being a jerk to me. Or I don't know if that's fair to say. Like, I don't want to downplay my dad's personality. Like, he was such a great guy. He was such a great guy. And anyone that knew him would agree with me 100%. But this disease turned him into a different person. And so that person was a jerk at times. And so I would be crying, didn't want him to see me crying because I was trying to be strong, and trying to like learn this medication stuff for him. But there, it was tough, and I know my brothers both experienced, not just my brothers, but other people that were around my dad during those final months, they saw it too. They witnessed it too, and it affected them as well. And so it's really a weird thing to deal with when you've had a parent who has treated you consistently the same for your entire life, and then suddenly they've kind of turned into this other person, and you don't really like this person very much, but you still love that person that you knew your whole life. So it's a weird tightrope to walk sometimes. And so I had a little two-wheel dolly that needed a tire repaired. And my dad used to go to this one place in town and knew the guy that was the manager of the place. And I knew the guy just because he was a local musician and knew my brother and whatever. So anytime I would go into the shop, I would be like, oh, hey, I'm Craig's sister or whatever I would, and he would just be like, yeah, what, all business. Couldn't crack a smile on this guy most of the time. So anyway, I went in one day to get this thing repaired for my dad, and he couldn't do it like that day. So he was like, well, I'll come out and get it, and if it's okay, I'll do it and let you know when it's ready. I said, yeah, sure, no problem. So we went out to the truck together, and so he could get this little two-wheel dolly thing. And I said, yeah, he goes, and I think he said something about, you're sure your dad's going to be okay? Because like he knew my dad enough to know my dad was very particular about things. And I said, yeah. I said, you know what? I go, he's just a little more uptight. I go, but because he's dying. I said, he's got cancer. And this guy's whole demeanor just changed right before my eyes. And he said, my wife has stage 4 breast cancer. He goes, and I can't do anything right. He goes, if I get her a pencil, it's not the right pencil, or, and so we had this moment together that was really kind of enlightening for me because, he said he had asked his caregivers, or I'm not sure who he asked, but he mentioned that, he's like, I can't do anything right. If she asks for a pencil and I bring her the wrong pencil, I get berated for it. And the person that he had asked or mentioned this to had said, it's because she's losing control. It's the only, there's just, you're losing all your control when you're sick. So you can't just do things for yourself that you once were able to do. So they tend to hold on to the little bit of control that they have. And I was like, oh my God, yes. And I took that back to my family, and they were like, oh, that makes so much more sense, And so, my sister-in-law, I remember she would be taking care of my dad, and she'd be like, I'm so scared to bring him the wrong spoon, because my father was very particular. He wanted a certain spoon for certain meals or desserts or whatever, and he wanted a fork and the knife, and he had a particular. And once we all kind of recognized that this was just his holding on to that little bit of control, and as they progress, you lose more control of your life, and I'm sure that is incredibly frustrating. I can't even imagine what that's like for someone to have to rely on other people to do things for them that they were once able to do without even thinking about it, So I was really grateful for that conversation, and I don't know what became of this man's wife. I hope she survived, but I don't know. But the fact that we had that little moment together was really nice, and it's kind of like a little pearl you take away from a really shitty situation that you're both in, but where you can relate to each other and kind of help each other out a little bit, and I don't know if he even realized the impact that little bit of information did for my family. So, but my dad was funny because he, I remember one time I was in the kitchen making him soup, and my brother and my sister-in-law were in the living room visiting with my dad. and I was making condensed, like Campbell soup or whatever it was on the stove, because that's how I grew up. You put it on the stove with the water, and I never do it in the microwave. I just don't like it in the microwave. It's just my preference, right? So my father's in the living room bitching to my brother and my sister-in-law about how, well, if he was paying someone to take care of him, they'd be doing the soup the way he wanted him to do it. And I'm in the kitchen, like, making the soup. And so he's going on. And I said, I'm working for free. So, and so I made him the soup and I brought it to him. I said, Dad, next time, I'll put it in the microwave. I'm sorry. I recognized that he wanted it done his way because he was trying to hold on to some control over his life and his, decision choices and whatnot. And so I said, Dad, I'm sorry. I said, next time I will make it in the microwave the way you want me to do it. And he said, it's okay. He's like, it's fine. So it was just like, he just wanted to voice his opinion. He wanted to like make it known that, his choice would be for me to put it in the microwave. And I didn't do that. So it's just those little things that, and here I am, living with him full time and taking care of him and trying to do the best I can. And he's still, driving the knife in. So take a breath, and sometimes, and like in that for instance, he couldn't see me in the kitchen, just like, not showing a lot of love to that soup that I was making for him. But it's just part of the process. It's part of the journey. And there are going to be some days that are so tough, just unbelievably tough. And I remember, and I want to talk about inappropriate humor because it comes up. Black humor, dark humor. There's all kinds of names for it. But anyone that has ever been a caregiver for someone that's in that situation where they're dying, I hope have utilized it, because it's like kind of, you have to, in order, like it's part of your survival tactic, I guess. I don't know what else to label it as. But, my dad there'd be days when my dad was pushing me to my very limits. And I always try to maintain kindness and patience. But let me tell you something. When you are the full-time caregiver, those limits can be pushed to a level that you're like, I'm going to jump off this ledge right now, because I can't deal with one more minute of him berating me or making me feel bad about, and I'm just trying to do the best I can here to take care of my daddy, So I remember one time my dad was really having a day and pushing me beyond my limits. And I called up my best friend, who she and I are notorious for our inappropriate sense of humor, and we'll find, and she's constantly sending me stuff, memes, and going, I'm going to go to hell. Like, but this is hilarious, and just, so, I remember calling her and I'm like, I don't think cancer's going to kill my dad. I'm going to kill my dad. I'm going to put a pillow over his face and just finish him off, because I was just like, what? And she knew, like I knew that was a safe outlet for me to call her and just say that, because that's how I was feeling in the moment. I would never hurt my father. I would never hurt anybody in that way. But in the moment, I was so just like, I am at the end of my friggin' rope, and I don't know what I'm going to do. So I called her, and I knew she would be the outlet for me to just be able to spew whatever I needed to spew. As horrible as that just sounded, and I know how bad that sounded. But she and we had a laugh about it. She's like, I know, and she was kind of going through the same thing with her husband at the time, who had also a terminal illness. So she and I kind of like, could bounce those things off each other and just kind of be like a safe outlet to just release that frustration and just go, okay, whew. I had to just step away for a minute. I'd step outside where my dad couldn't hear me saying those things, because I would hate for my father to ever think that I would harm him or not take care of him the best of my ability. But you are going to be pushed to your limits. And there are going to be days when you are going to want to just like, you know what? I'm going to speed up the process here. I know you won't do that. I would never do that. But it's a natural feeling to feel those, to have those feelings when someone that you love and you are doing your honest to God best to take care of is just, putting it and just, it's tough. It's a tough gig. It really is a tough gig. And so that is the importance. And that's why I talk about, you got to, take care of yourself. You need that respite care. So tap those resources so that you can step away. Or if my dad, my dad would come in and out of naps a lot. So if he was napping, that's when I would kind of step outside, take some deep breaths, call a friend, just kind of vent some stuff out. But it's natural and it's okay. And even though we kind of laughed about that comment I made, and you have to take it in the context to which it was meant. And it wasn't meant in any way to harm my dad, ever, by God. But those feelings are natural, and you are going to have those feelings because you're going to be just overtired and overworked and stressed, and you don't have a minute to yourself. You really don't, because you're always, what do they need? What do they need? What do they need? Not what you need. So that's the importance of a respite break, so that you can focus on your needs for a little bit, even if it's just a couple of hours. So I just want to tell, you out there, if you're in that position or you are watching this and you're the support system for someone that is the primary caregiver for somebody, please keep that in mind. They need a break. They need, even if it's just a couple of hours, but an overnight is even better, or, like a break. So, personalities change. My brother and my dad had a kind of a go-to, and I'm like, no, you can't talk to him like that, and everyone's trying to find their way. They're trying to get their footing with this uncharted territory, and we all make mistakes, and I say mistakes, but we all slip up, and we all maybe say things or do things or treat the person that we're trying to take care of maybe not so kindly, but you got to forgive yourself for that, because we're just human. We're just doing the best we can to take care of the person that we love, and we're going to F that up. We're going to F it up. I was talking to another friend of mine who lost her dad, and and she's still trying, and even though the process has been that my dad has been gone for 3 years, I'm still trying to process. I'm still trying to forgive myself for things that I did or didn't do or could have done better. So try not to beat yourself up. And I think, if this person, like my dad, for instance, if my dad could come back and visit me for 5 minutes, he'd be like, girl, you did, thank you, And that was one thing with my dad, speaking of gratitude. My dad and I, I'd have days where I was like, he's taking me for granted, and he just treats me how he wants to treat me, doesn't even think about my feelings. And, because you can't help not having your feelings hurt. You can't help feeling that you're getting beat up, emotionally. So, but my father, God bless his sweet soul, every night I would tuck him in, and it was so funny. So we had a little ritual. He was sleeping in the living room in a hospital bed, and I was in his room. And every night he had to be able to see his clock, and he had to have everything just so OCD in his place. And I'd get him tucked in, and I'd give him a kiss, and I'd tell him I loved him. And every night he would say thank you to me. And he would show his gratitude at the end of each day. So I know that he, deep down, he knew the sacrifices I was trying to make for him, and he acknowledged those every day. So, sorry. I'm not sorry, because it's emotional for me. But the fact that he recognized in some part that was still, my dad, he recognized that I needed to hear that to keep moving for him, for his sake. So, I hope if you're in that situation, the person that you're taking care of does show gratitude to you now and again, because a little bit goes a long way. It really does. And so it's tough. And 3 years later, it still breaks me up. So it's a process. And grief it's such an individual thing. And it's an ongoing process. I've talked to people that have lost their parents decades ago that still, a song or a memory or a movie, something just sparks a memory, and the tears come. You can't help it. So anyway, I just wanted to touch on the fact that, you know, there's pieces to caregiving for someone that's dying that may come out of nowhere and take you off guard. So I think, you know, it seemed to me in the cases of other folks that I know that have gone through the similar situations with people who died from cancer, you know, there's a lot of anger, and deservedly so. Like, understandably so. If I'd been given a term, I'd be pissed off too. I would be pissed off. And I don't know that I would be able to keep that to myself. And so, you know, we often take it out on the ones we love and care about and trust to not hold that against us. So if you're in that scenario, and maybe you're already at that point where their personality has changed and you can see that, I'm so sorry, because that is such a hard road to be on. It really is, if you're on the receiving end of that. And you know, I don't know how much of the brunt my brothers or the other folks that took care of my dad, you know, gave me respite. I don't know how much they took. I just know what I took from my dad, being with him for the majority of the time. So it takes a toll, and it doesn't always, and it's not magically like, oh, they're dead, it's gone. No, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. It's an ongoing process that you have to work through for years. And so I hope that that benefits you in some way, or helps you on your journey to kind of, you know, if you have somebody, and God, I hope you have somebody that you can make a phone call to, like I have, you know. And I am so grateful for my friends, and that they know me, and they know my, you know, they knew my dad, and they knew the personalities. And so I was very grateful that I was able to call my best friend and just be like, ooh, you know, and vent that and get it off my chest, so that I could just, okay, now let's get it Jack in check. Let's go back in there and give him the best care that I can give him, with love and respect and dignity. And, but it's a hard journey. It's such a hard journey. So I wish you love and peace, and I hope that this was helpful to you. So that's all I have for today. I just wanted to touch on that subject a little bit, and I'm sure we'll come back around to it at other times. So thank you for joining me, and we'll see you next time.